Hello everyone, welcome back to this yet another lecture on ecosystem and biodiversities. Friends, in the last lecture we had seen something important about the concept of ecosystem. That means we have gone through what is the basic definition and how to start understanding something about the ecosystem. Also, we have seen in some of the last lectures related to ecosystem, that is idea of terrestrial ecosystem and idea of aquatic ecosystem. And when we were talking something about the terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem, we had a major idea or we had a major concept in our mind that it should be look forward from the point of view of biotic component and abiotic component. And this is a study part for today's lecture. Today we are going to see forward for the idea, a general characteristics and the structural characteristics. Of course, it will include something about the biotic component and the abiotic component also. When we are talking something today about the structure and characteristics of ecosystem, our main idea and focus would be to study how the abiotic component, that means maybe it is something related to organic compound or inorganic compound, how they are important, what is their role and what are the characteristic feature of these components in our ecosystem. On another hand, we will also look forward today for one of the very important criteria which is related to biotic component, and of course this criteria of biotic study will help us understand our further process of diversities. So let's start our today's lecture with the understanding of characteristics of ecosystem. Let us make it very simple when we call it as characteristics of ecosystem, because it is basically a structure of ecosystem. So when we talk something about from the point of view of ecosystem, we should keep in mind, and we have discussed already also before in lectures, that it is made up of two basic components. That is, we human beings, even though are biotic in nature, we are having a biotic component or we will be called as a biotic component, yet we cannot survive all alone. That means the requirement of the biotic and abiotic are always interrelated. They always depend on each other for their existence. So we have two basic components in our ecosystem, and the two basic components, as we have said, are biotic components and abiotic component. Now, as I've told you that they both have to work together. That means they are interconnected with each other and they are in relation with each other. When these components, that means living organism, is in contact or in relation with the non-living organism, and when non-living organism is in contact with, that means in support or in relation with that of the biotic or living organism, it is actually called as holosynosis. Okay, so you have to keep this concept in mind, that when there is a relation or there is an interaction between the biotic and abiotic component, it will be called as an process of holosynosis. Now, what do you mean by the idea of biotic component and abiotic component? Let's understand it by one. Let's start something about with the idea of biotic component. So we know very clearly that biotic community is actually a community, a typical community which is having living parts in the environment. That means living bodies or living components like human, maybe plants, animals, microorganism, macroorganism, which are living, okay, so which can inhale and exhale. So it is not necessary what is the process of inhalation. For example, the plants take in the carbon dioxide and they give out oxygen. That is opposite to that of animal, that we take oxygen and eliminate out carbon dioxide. So here the criteria of understanding biotic community is something related to a living structure. It is not related to what do we inhale and what do we exhale. So basic idea over here is to just understand that it is made up of living parts. So these living parts means a number of populations, they are interrelated and they live together in as one community. Now these interrelated and living in one community is called as a species. That means when the plants are living in a particular area, call it as habitat, then it will be called as a particular land species. On the other hand, when the animals, for example, let's go with a group of tigers, when they are living in that particular area or habitat, it will be called as the species of that animal. Similar goes with the microbial community also, human community also. So one thing should be clear, that biotic community means typically organisms which are in living part. Okay, that is the first criteria. And the second criteria is that they should be living in a community. That means they should be living together in a group or in a colony so that it can be declared as a species. That will be called as a biotic community. Then what do you mean by abiotic community? Of course, it will be an opposite of biotic community, and it includes non-living component or non-living substances. Now these non-living substances are in general what we know as air, water and soil. So that is the basic idea which we have been made clear till today. But today we are moving forward with the idea of abiotic community, and let's see how these abiotic communities are included or categorized into three main factors by combining all the factors which are abiotic in sense. Okay. Now for example, what do I mean? When I am saying something about the air, water and soil, these are the three major components which have a physical and chemical property varied. But when we categorize something on the basis of their property, their statements and their function, that means we are including something major related to their physical area, their physical region, their physical property, their chemical property and their inclusion of all these things, that is air, water and soil. So on these basis of physical and chemical properties, the environment or the ecosystem is basically divided into, a biotic factor is divided into three major forms. And the first form is called as a climatic factor. Second form, Adaptic Factor, and the third one called as Inorganic Factor or inorganic substances. Let's understand one by one the concept so it becomes easy for us to clear the further process. What do you mean by a climatic factor when we are talking something about an abiotic component? So climatic factor means any climatic regime or any climatic physical factor which is involved in the environment. Okay, mark the words, any physical factor or any climatic regime physical factor which is involved in the environment. Now this can be something related to light, humidity, atmosphere, temperature, wind, water, etc. So abiotic components with climatic factor which help to change your seasonal patterns is called as an climatic factor. So that is one of the important abiotic component to maintain the temperature and to maintain the prosperity of the earth. So that is something important when we talk about abiotic component. What do you mean by then Adaptic Factor? Now Adaptic Factor is something related to the study of structure and composition of the soil. Now this soil structure and component of course includes the physical and the chemical properties of that soil. Okay, and what is typically given by the example as soil profiling. So many of you might have read the idea or heard the idea about soil profiling or mineral checking or soil checking. So that is nothing but an Adaptic Factor. What do we do in this Adaptic Factor when we try to understand this abiotic component is we try to study the physical property. That means we try to study what kind of soil is it. Is the soil porous or is the soil marshy or is the soil very fertile or is the soil deserted in area? So that is the physical property. When we talk something about the chemical property of this soil, that means we are talking about what content of mineral is there, the plant can survive over there, or what kind of minerals needed to be added so that the plant will survive over there. Can the soil maintain the profile, means can the soil hold the water so that the rainwater harvesting can be done. So that is called as basically the physical and the chemical properties of the abiotic component, and in short term it will be called as an adaptic factor. Now inorganic factor is very much clear and very much known to each and everyone. Inorganic factor and organic factor are something which are present naturally in the earth's surface. So that is one of important abiotic component. It is not one of the biotic component. Whichever is needed but which is not having a living system will be called as an abiotic factor. So inorganic factor which is present prosperously in the earth environment or in the land environment for the survival of the organism, like human being, animals, plants are. Inorganic will be water, carbon, sulfurs, nitrogens, and that for organic will be the conversion of these products with the help of photosynthesis product. So for example, carbon, water and phosphorus when combined together, they will form a protein molecule, and then in turn they will again form a carbohydrate molecule. Next one, a nitrogen will be trapped in form of a lipids. That can be a nitrogen oxides also. So that is something related and that is something interrelated also. That means you need organisms which are living need water, carbon and sulfur. Maybe the need is in direct form or maybe the need is in indirect form. And on the basis of this direct and indirect form, we usually classify them as inorganic and organic factors. So when it is something of raw and when it is something of whole material without any change which is present in the earth atmosphere as it is, it will be called as an inorganic factor. On the other hand, when they turn and they make themselves into another complex substance, that will be an organic factor. Then what is the, when we are studying something about these ecosystems, especially related to the abiotic components, what are the major factors which help us to understand the function of these ecosystems? So like we have seen something about the adaptic factor, we will just make an extended note of this adaptic factor by studying the soil function. Okay. So soil is something which is a complex form. So we have seen this thing when we were looking forward for the very first unit of our syllabus, where we were talking something about the lithosphere. And we have seen something important criteria when we were talking about lithosphere was the segmentation of the earth crust. Similarly, the soil is having a complex segmentation or sedimentation. So we can say that this soil is not a simple kind of soil, rather this soil is a mixture of components. This may be a weathered soil, this may be a fragmented soil, an inorganic soil, an organic soil, maybe it is having much nutrients in it. Then even though we know that the soil is having all these things, that means it is having nutrients, it is having basic components which is required for the living system, it is having organic matter, it is having inorganic matter, water matter, nutrient matter. How is it important for the organism? The basic understanding is that it is one of the important process. That means it is one of the important component in the process of nutrient cycle, which we also sometimes termed as nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, water cycles and proteins and carbohydrate cycles. So you can see that if these components are not present in the soil, that means organic or inorganic components are not present in the soil, one cannot carry out the nutrient cycle very fruitfully. So if vegetation is important, if you want to grow trees, if you want to grow the plantation, if you want to grow the food material for the organism, maybe it is a human being or maybe it is an organism or maybe it is an animal, you have to compulsory have a nutrient cycle, and for that soil is one of the important factor. The second important factor or function of an abiotic component is to maintain the atmosphere. So we have seen this thing also, that when carbon dioxide and oxygen is present in the atmosphere, it is the photosynthesis process which helps to maintain this cycle. So if the abiotic components like carbon dioxide and oxygen is not present, the organism would not have been able to survive. Reason is because even the one component like carbon dioxide is there and eliminated out from the atmosphere, there will be no process of photosynthesis, so we will not get any kind of vegetation or food material. Similarly, this abiotic component is also important because of the process. For example, when we talk something about the heat light, it is important for the process of transpiration, evaporation. So it maintains a cycle which we called as a rain cycle or atmospheric cycle. Unless and until there does not take place evaporation and transpiration, precipitation, you cannot find that rain will be successful in that particular area. And henceforth, abiotic components such as sunlight is important for it. The next one, when we see something about with regards to the sunlight, we also find that in the process of photosynthesis, sunlight or solar radiation has a major role. We know that transpiration and evaporation will take place because of the sunlight, but photosynthesis is one such process which helps or which takes place because only of sunlight. You can provide an artificial radiation, but what activity or what level of component activity what we find in the plant or what amount of organic material is produced in the plant, that is called as the food product, is produced in the plant differs very much in sense as compared to that of the artificial systems. So you need something called as photosynthesis for your living system, and for that photosynthesis, of course, the solar radiation is one of the important criteria which is abiotic in factor. This will of course again be important for the process called as metabolism, because producing food is not only the part of plant. That means photosynthesis is not the only basic criteria of plant. You have to move more forward, more than only producing a food material with the help of photosynthesis such as carbohydrates and proteins, but you have to move forward so that it can convert it into organic factors which will be easily available for that of the human being. So photosynthesis is not only applicable to plant, but it is also applicable indirectly to the other living organisms which try and consume these photosynthetic organisms. The next one is the abiotic factor, which is water. We know that water is something which is very important factor on the earth. So we have seen in some of the past lectures that how water is an important component for the survival of the system of the earth. That means how much capacity of water is there, fresh water is there, salty water is there, how much we consume, how much of percentage of water is in icebergs, etc., etc. But today what we have to see is this water system is present from the point of view of the cellular component. That means the living organism has one of the major part in our body, and that is called as the cellular body, which contains a protoplasm. That means it is a kind of a cell structure which is filled with water component. And what is the role of this protoplasm or water component or water content in the cell is to make a transparency. That means to survive the organism. Because if we feel exhausted, that means we are lagging with the water. We are not fulfilled. Our cells are not fulfilled with the water content, and henceforth we drink the water. That means our protoplasm is trying to become dry, it is lagging behind of water, and same is the concept with that of water when we talk about the human body. That means if the cellular body, hardly it is found in the studies that it some organisms can survive without the water. That means the protoplasm can survive without the water. It is one of the fluid material, can survive without the water when it is 30 to 50%. For example, you can go with the desert rats or that of the desert camels, because this can survive in the harsh areas or harsh climatic condition, because they have that kind of sebaceous gland which can store the water. On another hand, normally a normal person cannot survive when the protoplasm is lagging the water, and this component, when reaches to 10% or less than 10%, maybe the protoplasm will start to die and indirectly the organism will start to die. So henceforth, dying because of thirst is one such reason, that is called as lagging of water in the protoplasm. This water system is also helpful because it maintains the turbidity in the photosynthesis. So it is not only the idea of understanding of protoplasm, but also it is one of the major idea of understanding the concept that it is one of the important component to transport the nutrients. So if you want the nutrients to be transported, for example, particular organic or inorganic material is absorbed from the soil, but how will this root of the plant will transport this material to the abiotic factor? And of course the idea will be biotic factor like leaves or fruits or flowers. Of course it will be with the help of the water. So in the cells there is a water component, that is protoplasmic component, and this protoplasmic components helps to survive in organism body because it transports the nutrient. So when the nutrient is captured at one level, it will be transported to another level or another body part or another part of any living organism with this help of the transportation material, that is water. So it is one of the major chemical reaction process. So I hope you have understood till now what we have talked something about, a major component system of with general characteristics into factor of climatic condition, adaptic function, and inorganic and organic factors or substances. This factor of abiotic component is one of the major component for the living organism, because this factor itself is such complex that it makes the functioning of living organism to survive. Without abiotic component, organisms cannot survive. Like we have seen, without water it is hardly impossible to carry out the photosynthesis, transpiration, precipitation, as well as transport of chemical reactions or transport of major chemical components such as carbohydrates, proteins, nutrients to any of the other part of organism. So in short, one can say that without a biotic component, one cannot survive. That is, living organism is difficult to survive without the abiotic factor. In the next lecture, we will try to understand something about another important component, that is functioning of the biotic components, and it is very interesting to study how these components are interrelated when we have seen something with regards to a biotic component, because we now have to move forward and look at the idea that biotic components play an important role in your functioning of biotic component. So abiotic and biotic का relation हम next lecture में देखेंगे. Till the next lecture, study hard.